Hey guys, I guess this is working. My name is Andrew Cohen. Thank you, Thomas, for the nice introduction. I have to say that usually people cry after I speak, and not before, so I guess I'm ahead of the game. I could not be happier to be here with you all this morning. I came from Colorado, where it's actually warmer than it is here today. I don't know what you all are whining about with the heat. New York is just beautiful this time of the year. But I'm here to hear your stories. I'm here to absorb the lessons that you may share with me and to try to share with you my own experiences covering law and order, crime and justice for the past 16 years. Thank you to the Brennan Center for inviting me. Thank you to the National Legal Aid and Defenders Association. Thank you to Thomas. Thank you to the aforementioned Godsend, Emily, and to my boss John and to Janine for having me and for putting together this gathering, this meeting of the minds. As Thomas said, I have been asked to reassure you at the outset of this day that I am not here as a journalist working on a story. I don't have my little journalist notebook with me. Anything you say to me will not be used against you. Anything you say in front of me will be off the record so that you can freely disclose to me all of the secrets that you have about your clients and your work and your bosses that you've been hoarding inside you. If you can't trust the legal analyst, really, who can you trust? I hope that makes you feel a great deal better. But the truth is that while I have promised that I won't report on anything that happens today, I hope that this meeting leads to many good stories for me down the road, stories that I'd like to write for The Atlantic, stories that I'd like to pitch to CBS News, stories, if they're good enough that I can even have a conversation with 60 Minutes about, stories that I want to tell about the good work that you guys do on behalf of your clients, stories that I hope that either today or down the road you will be willing to share with me. Given my professional pedigree, you probably won't be surprised to learn that I believe that the more stories about your clients and yourselves, whether they're good stories or stories of injustice, the more likely it is that the world will appreciate what you do. And in appreciating what you do, the more likely the world will be willing to assist you in doing it. For me, the invitation, the Brennan Center Fellowship is providential. It has been a remarkable year for me of growth in this area of the law. I've known for 20 years, since I was in law school, about the right to counsel, of course. I've covered Sixth Amendment cases for CBS since the 1990s. But it was only this past year, as I began to dig deep about Gideon and the 50th anniversary, that I truly absorbed what you guys are up against, what you folks have to deal with, the enormity of the gulf that exists between the promise of Gideon 50 years ago and the practice that you deal with day in and day out. For me, digging into that story, talking to Anthony Lewis before he died, doing the research that I needed to do for the series of pieces that I did for The Atlantic was transformative. It was as important a story as any I've covered since Bush versus Gore. And you could argue that in many ways it's just as important, especially for your clients. What I learned, what I discovered was shocking, even to someone who is so cynical about the law as I am after being a lawyer and then a recovering lawyer and now a legal journalist. All of these people, right, too poor to pay for their own lawyers, too uncertain of the intricacies of the law, too powerless to demand of their representatives on the state level, on the federal level, to have their rights guarded, herded like cattle through these criminal justice systems, whether they're guilty or not. For these people, and for me, really, Gideon seems like a cruel joke, right? It seems like a right without a remedy, a promise made by judges who really have no intention of seeing it kept. But I don't have to stand here and tell you guys that. You guys live it. You guys live with the unfunded mandate from the Supreme Court. You guys live with Congress and state legislatures that see no political gain to help poor people, indigent people, to exercise their rights. You live with the merciless crush of the docket. You live with the ways in which prosecutors game the system to chalk up wins at the expense of justice, with the judiciary's case management ham-handedness that we see. You're the ones with a few hundred clients at a time, juggling it all without adequate investigative resources, running out of time forever. I mean, I wish everyone in America could see Dawn Porter's brilliant film, Gideon's Promise. The fact that she would leave her law firm to do that is remarkable to me. The sad thing is that I fear that even if everyone in America saw that movie and got a glimpse into what indigent defense is like, I don't think that it would make a big deal of difference. I think that there is still this animosity toward criminal defendants that we somehow have to push through. And it's not like this is a mystery of what needs to happen. I've spoken over the past year with federal judges who acknowledge the scope of the problem. I've spoken to state judges who acknowledge the scope of the problem. I've heard from Attorney General Eric Holder, who is more aware than many of his predecessors about the scope of the problem, and yet nothing really gets done. Budgets get cut. There are still not enough state and federal resources devoted to this. Still, the U.S. Supreme Court sort of hems and haws around the edges and fails or refuses to give meaning to Gideon and really undercut it. There is a profound disconnect, it seems to me, especially here, the Sixth Amendment issue, the fair trial issue, between what the Constitution promises and what gets delivered. Earlier this year, for the Atlantic piece that I wrote about Gideon, I spoke with John Paul Stevens about the right to read. And I picked him because he's retired and alive and not on the court, and I thought he might be candid with me. And he told me in words that I did not include in my Atlantic piece. He told me some pretty profoundly disappointing things, actually. He told me that he didn't believe that Gideon and its progeny necessarily demanded that states provide the funding necessary to ensure that all indigent defendants get all of the representation that the Constitution requires. He defended the court's decision, this horrible decision in Strickland in 1984, which many experts and myself believe really marked the end of the court's progressive advance in Sixth Amendment law. I was asked last 2 months ago, what's the biggest decision of the court that nobody really knows about? And I picked Strickland because I think it fundamentally undercut Gideon, and it excuses the deprivation of rights. So for the justice to say that, this is from a moderate man, more moderate than many of his successors on the court, it's a reminder of where the court is on this. All right, so I'm going to stop harshing your caffeine buzz this morning. I'm going to stop telling you what you already know about how bad things are and how likely they are going to stay given the current political conditions. Today's not the day, and the Brennan Center is not the place, really, to dwell on the negative. I just want to briefly talk about now the genius of the community-oriented defense. I think one of the geniuses of it, the concept of it, is that it doesn't whine about what isn't. It focuses on what is. And although I haven't yet written about it, and I've only recently become aware of it with my work at the Brennan Center, I'm drawn by what you folks are doing here, because what you're doing, I think, is true to two very, very core American ideas. The first I've just mentioned. The COD is nothing if not an optimistic enterprise, right? And America loves optimism. The premise here is that you make do with what's available, you're creative, you're dynamic, and I think the virtue of the program isn't just the necessity of it. The second component that I find compelling about the community-oriented defense is that it's very enduring. You're seeking to turn legal representation into a service industry, and as we know, America loves its service industries. A client-first approach, a focus on long-term client needs, all of that threatens to overturn what people perceive about the relationship between lawyer and client, the static relationship that's existed forever between lawyer and client, a relationship that I think needs to be tweaked, that needs to be looked at anew. And indeed, what I admire most about what you are trying to do here is that you're willing to look at old problems in new ways. Our criminal justice system needs more of that. Washington needs more of that. Our laws need more of that. And I think, obviously, millions of our fellow citizens, the guilty, the not guilty, criminal defendants, civil litigants, need more of that as well. And so the question for me, and the reason why I'm here today, is how can you translate what you are doing here into something more? How do you make these ripples of hope that are stirring here turn into that mighty river that's going to one day help many more of these poor people who really, in their darkest moment, have no one to turn to but you folks. So what I'm trying to do today and why I'm here is to learn more about what you're doing, to dig down into some of the stories that you may be willing to share with me for future use, and so that I can become, for what you guys are doing here, a bit of a tribune, so I can sort of spread the word. I think that each of you probably has a few stories within you about your clients that doesn't just highlight the great work that you do, but that implicates the broader issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I think the American people would want to hear from that, and I think it's the journalist's job to try to translate that, to personalize this very broad and sad story in a way that the average person can understand. I think that's one of the failings here, is that the average person just doesn't get it. And we have to do better, as Thomas alluded to. By the same token, what I want to do is to offer you my own experiences and my own judgments, having been a lawyer and a journalist, to give you a sense of what it's like on the other side of the Great Divide, so that whether you're talking to me or not, as you go forward, you're able to better evaluate and plan and sort of conceive of the ways in which you can get your stories to your local reporters, to your local media, to your the folks who are enlightened enough to understand that there's a story here and who want to try to help. So I hope in the next few hours, in the next day or so, I can answer your questions and try to give you whatever guidance I can on how to make it better. I think it's a very important opportunity now, with all of the way that social media works, with all of the way the internet works, that you can instantly have a local, there's no local story anymore, is what I'm trying to say. Every story of a single client in a single county, in a single courtroom, can become a national story, can become an international story, if you get it into the right hands and if you deal with the right people in the right fashion. So I am, as I said, delighted to be here. I'm going to stop talking now. I promised I would only talk for 15 minutes. And I'm going to get out from this podium, and then I'm going to answer any questions that you have on anything that, that you might have to start the process of sharing with you whatever I can about the media. And you guys, whatever I say can be on the record. You can report it to any of your news organizations. It's a one-way street. I promise I won't say anything, but anything that I say can be used against